What if a fungus began infecting every living person and turned them into mindless disease-spreading killers? What would you do? I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to survive the initial outbreak in The Last of Us Prologue. In 1968, two epidemiologists appear on a television interview debating what types of microorganisms could destroy mankind. One suggests that a virus such as influenza can cause massive destruction, but the other poses fungus could cause more damage in the right conditions. Fungi, he explains, have the ability not just to kill, but to control the mind of its host organism and keep the deceased alive for its needs. While not yet strong enough to be threatening to humans, as global temperatures rise, fungi might gain the ability to take over human bodies. If that happens, he says there would be no cure, and everyone would die. Okay, this is absolutely terrifying. These two scientists are debating over what's the greatest threat to mankind on national television, when this man describes something so messed up that it should have sent shockwaves across the country. Instead, everyone here goes back to their everyday lives and pretends like they haven't just heard that their brains could be taken over by a mind-controlling fungus. If it were me, I would move to an arid climate and fumigate my home to make sure it's hotter than hell. Even though these people think that they're not immediately screwed, there's something they can do to help prepare themselves for the day the fungus eventually gets sick of the swamp and decides to make their bodies its new home. Rather than pretend like none of this is ever going to happen, there should be a push for funding to create a vaccine and control this outbreak before it even happens. In 1918, the Spanish flu emerged and infected 500 million people, aka 1/3 of the world's population, killing roughly 50 million in total. The spread of the flu was fast and deadly primarily because of the conditions of World War I and the lack of a vaccine ready and on hand. Had the people watching this news segment been more aware of history, they may have been able to see how important it was to control the outbreak before it even began. In reality, fungus isn't a threat to humans, but it's a threat to amphibians, insects, and other arthropods. More research could have been done on how the fungus takes over its amphibious hosts and how to save them before it's too late. Now, this isn't the perfect solution because amphibians are fundamentally built different than humans. So I would also push to fund research that studies less deadly fungus that can affect the human body, like Candida, athlete's foot, and ringworm, to find a link between how these fungus developed and evolved to infect humans. By understanding the link in these fungi's evolution, the people in this world could have seen the warning signs coming when a more deadly fungus like the cordyceps began to do the same. Instead, they ignored the warning signs and leave themselves absolutely unprepared and are about to realize it was their biggest mistake yet. In 2003 in Austin, Texas, teenager Sarah Miller wakes up on the morning of her dad's birthday and begins to cook the two of them a special breakfast. Joel Miller comes down and the two banter about his turning 36 and their day ahead when Tommy, Joel's brother, arrives. Tommy informs Joel of unexpected complications at their construction job, forcing them to stay out late. Sarah's pissed, but Joel assures her that he will be home by 9 p.m. with a birthday cake. Over the radio, a news broadcast mentions a troubling occurrence in Jakarta, Indonesia. The three of them brush it off, although Sarah does school them with a geography lesson. Before they head out, Sarah quickly sneaks into her father's room and finds his broken wristwatch and takes it, along with some money. Looks like he'll be paying for his own birthday gift. Outside, their neighbor Mr. Adler greets Joel, Sarah, and Tommy as they prepare to leave. He asks when Sarah will come over to visit as he feeds his elderly mother-in-law in a somewhat vegetative state, and reluctantly, Sarah agrees to visit that evening. After school, Sarah goes to a watch repair shop. As the owner begins to fix Joel's watch, his wife bursts in and kicks Sarah out, hurriedly announcing the shop's early closure. It's strange, but Sarah makes her way home at the shopkeeper's wife's warning, passing by several emergency response vehicles on the way. At her neighbor's house, Sarah and Mrs. Adler bake raisin cookies. The older woman does not seem concerned about the increased planes and emergency vehicles, even though Sarah asks about them. Eventually growing bored, Sarah browses the family's collection of movies. As she does, the elderly woman behind her begins to move erratically like she's in pain, but Sarah doesn't notice. She picks out an action movie DVD and lies that her father will be home soon so she can leave. As she exits with a container of cookies, Sarah notices the Adler's dog staring strangely at the elderly woman, but she decides to ignore it. As she walks down the street to her house, several military planes pass overhead. Later that night, Sarah is reading magazines while a news report about a series of strange and violent crimes in Austin plays on the television. When her father comes home at 10 p.m., she scolds him for being late and for getting a birthday cake before giving him his presents, the watch, and the movie borrowed from the Adlers. Okay, there are tons of warning signs here, Sarah is just a teenager, so we've got to cut her some slack. But there's no avoiding that the combination of everything together should have set off alarm bells much earlier. It would have been the dog staring at the old woman like this for me. I mean, there were literally cookies being baked in the room next door. What dog do you know stares at an old woman like this when they have the opportunity to catch scraps of food? Now, the earliest sign of danger was the news story covering the strange occurrence in Jakarta. The most important part of this news broadcast is that the radio host says that these are continued disturbances, which means that the disturbances have been happening for some time, and they've already been covered before. If Sarah and Joel had been paying attention to these disturbances and these occurrences in Jakarta or anything like what's about to happen, Joel, Sarah, and Tommy should have already made plans to get the heck out of a major city and isolate themselves from everyone else before hits the fan. The news broadcaster goes on to say how US citizens are being advised, but Joel is too busy wondering where Jakarta is to hear anything she says. If it were me, even though he's the internet's gorgeous boyfriend at the moment, I would tell Joel to shut his beautiful mouth and turn the radio all the way up to see just exactly what's going on. The other big mistake Sarah makes here is leaving the jewelry store without asking what's going on. This woman clearly knows that there's imminent danger outside, and even though I might question her sanity, if she told me there was a brain-eating fungus running rampant throughout Austin, I still would never go outside without knowing exactly what I was going up against. Normally, it's polite to mind your own business, but when someone acts like this and then expects you to go outside, it's time to pay attention and ask questions to figure out what's got them so freaked out. If Sarah had pressed the shopkeeper's wife for information earlier, she would have known to pay more attention to the news. Without knowing more, there isn't much that she could have done here, but if it were me, once I had this knowledge, I could have found Joel and left before it was impossible to do so. I would have known to avoid other people, and I would have tried to get my hands on a computer to read real-time updates and tips from people in my area on forum boards that were available in 2003. I would also try to find a way to shield myself against the fungus, covering all exposed areas of my skin and prepare to run at a moment's notice. Instead, Joel, Sarah, and Tommy avoid the early warning signs and are about to pay the consequences. Sometime after watching the movie and Sarah falls asleep on the couch, Joel gets a call. It's Tommy, who has been put in jail for participating in a bar fight, which Tommy swears he did not start, and Joel reluctantly agrees to come and bail him out. Heading upstairs, he puts Sarah to bed and leaves. A few hours later, Sarah wakes up. It's after 2 a.m. and there are multiple aircrafts flying above the house. Something terrifying has happened, and she searches for her father, but he still hasn't returned yet. When she turns on the TV, the only broadcast is an emergency message warning everyone to stay indoors. Suddenly, the Adler's dog appears at the door, begging to be let into the house, and Sarah goes outside to calm the frightened dog. When she tries to walk it back home, the dog panics and runs off. It's strange, and as car alarms go off in the neighborhood, Sarah notices the Adler's front door is open. Okay, Sarah here is still avoiding the warning signs, and Joel should have never left his teenage daughter home alone to help Tommy, leaving her all alone at her house while chaos is unfolding all around her. They should already be halfway done building a bunker somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, but instead, she's standing here with the Adler's dog, wondering what the heck is going on with all these low-flying aircrafts. Sarah needs to be woken up to the fact that there's something that's immediately going to threaten her life, and at this point, the Adler's dog is her best bet. Even though dogs can't communicate, Sarah can very clearly tell that this dog is in distress, and instead of taking it seriously, she tries to bring it back to her neighbor's house. The dog has never appeared to be in any danger before, and animals have instincts that make them able to anticipate a natural disaster before it happens. If it were me, rather than disregard the dog's behavior, Sarah should take this and her television's national alert as a sign that some sort of natural disaster is underway. Now, there's no clear scientific evidence that suggests dogs can predict natural disasters, but their olfactory senses are said to be 10,000 to 100,000 times stronger than humans, so they can smell when there's a change in the air before disaster strikes. Most fungi have a mold or mushroomy smell to them, so this dog would have been able to have smelled when the old woman was infected earlier in the day. At this point, I would assume that a tornado has struck somewhere nearby based on this dog's behavior. Austin is not particularly prone to devastating natural disasters, even tornadoes, but there have been some throughout its history. The city has even felt the shake of an earthquake in 1887, so nothing's impossible. That means that in a disaster scenario, Sarah's best bet is to listen to the national alert on her TV and stay the indoors and shelter in place. If Sarah went back inside, there's no guarantee that the phones will be working, but she should at least try to call Joel or the police to get someone there to help her. Calling the police and getting nobody would at least shed some light on the severity of the situation, but instead, she ignores the warning signs and has come face to face with a deadly fungus to realize life as she knows it is about to change forever. Sarah goes up to the Adler's house to investigate, and inside, things are in disarray. She makes her way towards the kitchen, calling out to anyone, but then she slips on a pool of blood. She follows the trail and sees Mr. Adler leaning in the corner, barely alive and seemingly attacked. He's so weak he can barely ask for help. Sarah turns towards the rest of the blood to find Mrs. Adler on the ground, being devoured by her mother. The older woman slowly looks up, and Sarah notices strange tendrils moving in her mouth. The elderly woman screams at Sarah, who begins sprinting out of the house. At that moment, her father and Tommy pull up in their truck. Both men hop out, and Joel tells Sarah to get into the vehicle. The elderly woman runs out of the house and trips on the porch. The trio stand in shock before the woman snaps back up and starts running at them again. Joel, thinking fast, uses a large wrench in his hand to bludgeon the woman down. Sarah is confused and in shock, and Joel explains to his daughter that something is happening all over town. But in order to be safe, the three of them must leave town now. They pack into the trunk and speed away from the neighborhood. On the highway, the three discuss what's going on. Tommy explains he heard on the radio that some type of virus or parasite is spreading rapidly, but no one seems to know the cause. Joel and Tommy debate if terrorists are somehow involved. Sarah asks how they can know if they're infected, and Joel explains that right now, it's said to mostly be affecting people in cities. Sarah realizes that the Adlers took the elderly woman into the nearby city for regular medical treatments. They drive towards a broken down van and family asking for help. Sarah and Tommy want to stop, but Joel commands them to keep going. It's cold-blooded, but it's the only way they'll be able to survive. The highway ahead becomes full of cars at a standstill, and it's clear everyone is heading out of town. With time running out, Joel tells Tommy to take a shortcut across an empty field. They do, and some other cars from the traffic jam begin to follow. Okay, Joel is finally doing the right thing. There's a deadly fungus on the loose that's making everyone go crazy, and stopping to pull over to help these people could have been a fatal mistake. Nobody likes a backseat driver, but if Tommy had pulled over and helped these people like he wanted to, they could have all been killed. When there isn't a parasite on the loose, picking up a hitchhiker is risky, and Tommy and Joel are trying to get out of town as fast as possible. Stopping to pick someone up that could have been infected would at worst kill them and at best slow them down, and they've already wasted enough time. However, there's something that Tommy and Joel could have done to have helped them escape the situation faster. Tommy here was just in jail for a bar fight with one of these infected things. Based on the state of the roads and the panicked way that Joel and Tommy show up to get Sarah, there's no doubt chaos was going down at the jail too. If it were me, while I was at the jail, I would have stolen a police radio to help me guide me away from the most infected areas. Google Maps doesn't have a setting to avoid fungus yet, so these guys are going to have to operate outside of the law. The jail wouldn't be operating regularly, making it easier to steal one, while the police try to handle these rapid insane things that have affected everyone in sight. The radio would be crucial in finding the best way to safety, as well as where to go. The men have already driven to the highway and have found it completely packed. They've had to change the course of their journey, but don't know exactly where to go next. Going anywhere near the city is a bad idea, since that's where the fungus originated, and heading back to the suburbs where they're from is bound to be worse than when they left it. Nobody is safe in this situation, not even the police, but they're better equipped to protect themselves, and by tapping into their radio, not only could Joel and Tommy find the best roads to take, they could also find a location that the police have cordoned off from the infected for their own protection. They'll eventually find a place to stop, and going somewhere with people that are more equipped to defend themselves is their best bet. There's possibly even military involvement at this point, and there could be efforts to fly them out of there. With a little more thinking on their feet, these guys could have maximized their potential for escape, but how can you blame them when the infected look like this? Your fight or flight response must be going crazy. After passing over a hill, they spot a huge convoy of army vehicles on the highway they need to get on. In a panic, Tommy takes the truck in a different direction, the only way they can go. Joel and Tommy devise a plan to take the outskirts as far as they can, then head towards Mexico. Terrified, Sarah suggests the infection could be worldwide, but the men don't answer, determined to survive. Suddenly, 3 passenger planes appear, flying dangerously low. A fleet of emergency vehicles cuts off the truck's path and forces them to drive through the center of town. In town, there's pandemonium. People are running, fighting, and looting. It's a difficult street to navigate. A large swarm of people exit a movie theater and force Tommy to drive backwards. That's when Sarah notices something in the sky and realizes it's a plane falling towards the town. She yells a warning to them, and Tommy throws the truck back into drive as the plane crashes, creating a massive explosion. Debris begins flying everywhere and shoots into the truck, knocking Sarah unconscious. The girl wakes up as her father tries to pull her out of the truck. After they do, another car crashes into theirs, setting it on fire and separating Sarah and Joel from Tommy. Since it's too dangerous to get around, the brother tells Joel to meet at the river outside of town. With no other options, Joel carries Sarah, who hurt her ankle in the crash and can't run. Moving through the alley, Joel comes upon a horde of the infected, busily devouring people. He tries to be quiet, but one of them notices and begins pursuing them. It chases the survivors through a restaurant, barreling after them as he narrowly avoided catching up to them. Running out of the building, it's about to reach the survivors outside of the restaurant, but is shot in the head. Joel turns and sees the soldier who rescued them. He tries to explain that his daughter is injured, but the soldier orders him to stand still as he radios his commander. Sarah worries about meeting with Tommy again as the officer gets a command back over the radio, but then the man aims his gun at them, intending to kill them. Okay, initially Joel was right to trust this military guy. In natural disaster situations, or when there's a threat to civilians, the military is supposed to help people fleeing from the threat, and Joel was just saved by this soldier, so it makes sense that he thinks he's no longer in danger. The soldier is supposed to help him get to safety, but there were subtle signs Joel could have looked for to realize this was not going to happen at all. The soldier tells Joel and Sarah to stay put, and uses his radio to call his higher-ups about what he should do with them. His whole tone changes, and he asks him to repeat the command. According to research done on communication at UCLA, only 7% of communication is the actual words being said. 38% of it is the way a person says it, and 55% of communication is based on body gestures and language. Which means that I'm 38% positive that Joel here is screwed, because the way the soldier asks his commanding officer to clarify indicates he's disturbed by what the officer has just told him to do. The soldier is also holding a gun pointed at the two of them. So based on the situation, I'm also 55% sure this guy's having the worst day on the job of his life, and at this point, protecting himself is priority number one. The combination of his tone of voice and the gun pointed at Joel should indicate that it's time to run. The biggest problem here is that Joel doesn't have anywhere to go, or anything to hide behind. If he runs, the soldier could shoot him from a distance, and he has a long way to go before he's able to get to cover. His best bet is to drop Sarah and run at the soldier since he's closer to him, and hoping that the element of surprise works in his favor. However, Joel doesn't do this, and has to suffer one of the worst losses imaginable to realize fungus isn't the only thing that can hurt you in this world. Realizing what's happening, Joel begins to run but is shot by the soldier. He falls down a slope and drops Sarah, who rolls away. The soldier stands over Joel, preparing to execute him when he's shot dead by Tommy at the last second. Joel immediately runs towards his daughter, who has been critically injured. She's bleeding out from a wound in her abdomen. Joel yells at his brother to help, but Tommy doesn't. He stands there as the situation sinks in. In denial, Joel applies pressure to Sarah's wound and attempts to pick her up as she screams in pain. Slowly, Joel understands that he can't stop the bleeding, and his daughter dies in his arms. It's tragic, but soon he'll be going to a galaxy far, far away to get a replacement. There's a fungus among us, and it's officially infecting people's brains and trying to kill you on sight. Not only that, but there's something even more dangerous you may encounter. A human being who's willing to do anything and everything to survive this new post-apocalyptic world. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, how to survive, and how to beat the infected in the latest episodes of The Last of Us. In 2023, 2 decades after the outbreak of mutated cordyceps, which turned those infected into mindless zombie-like creatures, Joel here lives inside a quarantine zone in the area that used to be Boston, Massachusetts. He lives a seemingly quiet life as he copes with the loss of his daughter in the first days of the outbreak. In between menial sanitation jobs, he meets with his partner Tess. Together, they act as smugglers trying to eke out a living as a group called the Fireflies attempt to overthrow the authoritarian police state government, Fedra. Joel uses his position with the quarantine zone to play both sides of the field. He befriends Fedra agents and sells them illicit goods, smuggles supplies in and out of the quarantine zone, and on occasion, works to advance the Firefly cause, more for personal gain rather than political. Tensions are mounting across the quarantine zone as the Fireflies have become more active in their attacks on Fedra soldiers. Joel mostly tries to stay out of the way. Marlene, leader of the Fireflies, keeps a young girl, Ellie, chained inside of a room. Each day she comes to check on her, but refuses to let her leave. She claims Ellie's important, and her life cannot be risked in the city. The Fireflies are planning a large mobilization of all their agents in one section of the city, but their soldiers are getting restless. No one has explained why this is necessary. Marlene tries to keep everyone calm, but knows she's running out of time. Joel and Tess are in need of a car battery and other supplies so that they can leave Boston and go in search of the man's brother Tommy out west. To gain these resources, they strike a deal with an unworthy source who rips them off. Joel and Tess plan to kill the double-crosser and steal his supplies. They sneak into the building where they believe he will be, only to find a bloodbath. Marlene is there in the hallway with a gunshot wound, and they realize the dealer was attempting to sell the same broken supplies to the Fireflies. Now desperate and bleeding out, Marlene enlists Joel and Tess's help to transport the mysterious teenage girl, Ellie, out of the quarantine zone and into the abandoned city. The planned Firefly movements for the next evening should draw all the attention away from their exit. If they meet with a group of rebels at the old state capitol building, they can exchange Ellie for their supplies. With no other options and running out of time to find their friend, Tess convinces Joel to take the girl. The three set off the next night. Making their way through the rainy, dark compound, they sneak through a concealed hole in the border wall. Climbing out, they come face to face with a lone Fedra soldier and a gun pointed at their heads. The soldier recognizes Joel. He's one of his buyers, and the woman tries to make a deal with the man to spare their lives. The soldier refuses to bargain and begins to assess the situation, pulling out a scanning device to make sure none of the three are infected. As he approaches Ellie, she takes out a knife and stabs the man. Joel springs to action and pummels him, violently and repeatedly punching him in the face. Tess grabs the scanner, revealing its red screen. Ellie is infected with cordyceps. Panicked, Ellie screams that she's not sick. Neither Tess nor Joel trust her, but she reminds them that if they don't run now, they'll be captured and executed by Fedra. The three drop the argument for now and hurry away from the quarantine zone and into the ruins of Boston. Okay, we are not off to a great start. The mission has only just begun and someone is already dead. Could this have been avoided? Marlene was wise to mobilize the Fireflies in such numbers that most of the Fedra agents would be focused on their activity rather than patrolling the border. Most, but not all agents. Unluckily for Joel, Tess, and Ellie, this agent was patrolling and was able to get the upper hand on the three of them. But what if they had gone a different route? Boston is a port city with many waterways. Would it have been impossible to use those? If the group had ventured out to the water, they could have swam or used a small boat to make their way around the peninsula to safety. There are a few pros to this maneuver. There is no knowledge of the infected being able to swim, so there should be no scuffles there. Also, this moves Joel, Tess, and Ellie further away from the Fedra and Firefly battle. There might be Fedra soldiers patrolling the shoreline or in the water itself, but Marlene's plan to distract the government seems to be working, so would it not also be applied to those agents if they exist? It's also more doubtful that Fedra would have many agents patrolling the water in the first place. If the infected cannot swim, they do not pose a threat there. This is also a post-apocalypse, and most of the threat to human life seems to come from the land. The chances of anyone using a watercraft to sneak around are minuscule. Moving through the water would be quicker for the group as well, as there's less danger. The route of circling the land rather than cutting across has far less physical obstacles to overcome. It is also night, so the ability to see far into the water would decrease. This would give Fedra a more difficult time spotting a lone boat. But this is the way that Tess and Joel decided to go. Could they have better prepared for this excursion? The pairs are smugglers by trade, which we understand from the way in which they talk with the soldier about their runs. This also means the soldier is aware of their dealings, and generally speaking, fine with them. He already profits from them as he buys medicine from Joel on a regular basis. Since this soldier knows what activities the two of them engage in, could they have bribed him for safe passage? Surely there's something he needs. We know he smokes cigarettes and perhaps uses other substances. Reaching an agreement about however much illicit goods the soldier wants could be beneficial. To give credit where credit is due, Tess does try to negotiate with the soldier. He demands that he gets free medicine and the entire earnings of the smuggling run that the two embark on. These are harsh demands to be sure, but they are something Tess and Joel could work with. It's logical that Tess and Joel have a good idea where the soldier is stationed. Maybe there's some variation in the schedule, and he does not spend every night in the same spot. But Joel still talks with him regularly when he deals him cigarettes, so he also has access to this information. Earlier, the soldier warned Joel to stay inside and lay low on this night because Fedra was expecting a battle with the Fireflies. At the time, Joel did not know of Ellie's existence and that he and Tess would be needed to transport her somewhere. Yet Joel could have pressed the soldier for more information or found a way to contact him again once he learned of his new smuggling deal to get the information about what to expect and what pathways to use. Instead, Joel uses the time in between meeting Ellie and heading off on the trek to nap. That's a valid use of time, but perhaps not the most wise thing to do. Now that he, Tess, and Ellie are in this situation, they have few options. There is a gun pointed at the back of their heads. They have no real power. Even Tess is negotiating things. Ellie makes a move by stabbing the soldier. This is not ideal as it leaves a dead body in their wake, but it is decisive action which gets the trio out of this sticky situation. Stabbing is not ideal because other Fedra agents will eventually find the body and have an inkling of what happened. They might not follow the group into the city. However, since the abandoned Boston is allegedly fairly dangerous, and a single soldier's body does not constitute an emergency, regardless of if this was the best way to handle this situation, it has been handled, and that's more power to Ellie for doing so. The next morning, Ellie wakes up to Joel and Tess armed and ready to kill her. They demand she explain the situation. Ellie reveals that the Fireflies believe she has a cure to the cordyceps infection. She was bitten by an infected person several weeks earlier, but never became infected herself. In fact, her bite mark is mostly healed. That's why Marlene and the Fireflies want to get her away from federal oversight so they can study her case. Without much choice, Joel and Tess agree to finish taking her to the capital. Joel, however, refuses to give Ellie a weapon. The trio make their way out of the building and trek silently through the city. It's Ellie's first time being outside of a quarantine zone, and she's surprised to find it mostly void of the infected. Her and Tess begin to bond, but Joel remains suspicious of her condition. They soon come to a crossroads. The most direct path to the capital is blocked by a mound of resting infected. Tess explains that all the infected in any area are connected through the fungus which infected them. A single infected can send signals to all the infected nearby, who will converge to that location, and it is therefore imperative to avoid disturbing any of them. The group is forced to cut through the History Museum to reach the capital. The museum had once been overrun by infected, but they seem to have died out long ago. They enter the museum and make their way to the top floor, planning to access the roof and cross the city that way. As they reach the final level, the clicking sound of the infected creeps in. They remain still as these creatures called clickers are blind and hunt based on sound. The waiting doesn't work for long, as the two infected begin attacking the survivors. Joel and Tess each fight off one, while Ellie scrambles for safety. The group splits up, but narrowly escapes the museum and kill their attackers. On the roof, Joel wraps Tess's injured foot with electrical tape so they can keep moving. They finally arrive at the Capitol building and spot the Fireflies truck, but see no agents. Sensing something is wrong, Joel moves to investigate. The truck is completely empty, and only a small trail of blood leads into the building. Losing patience, Tess drags Ellie into the Capitol, and it's there they stumble upon a scene of carnage. Inside are half set of explosives and weapons, surrounded by the dead bodies of the Fireflies. Joel and Tess conclude that one of the agents got infected and began attacking the others, leading to a deadly shootout. At that moment, an infected man begins to move, so Joel fires a few rounds into him, but then they all realize that more infected will soon swarm the place. Tess begins to ransack the explosives, dumping over barrels of gasoline. She yells at the others to leave. She instructs Joel to seek the help of their friends Bill and Frank, but Joel doesn't want to abandon her. Ellie quickly realizes that Tess was bitten at the museum and doesn't have much time left before she turns. Tess reveals the bite mark on her shoulder, and Joel hesitates, but she forces them out moments before the swarm breaks down the door. As the infected rush through the building, Tess tries to ignite her failing lighter. The infected begin to stop and listen to the noise. One creature approaches Tess and kisses her, its tendrils worming their way into her mouth. Finally, the lighter catches, and Tess throws it onto the gasoline. Outside, Joel and Ellie watch the explosion. A few burning infected squirm out of the building and collapse a few feet away, but the two survivors turn to carry on towards the edge of the city. Okay, desperate times call for desperate measures, and boy are things getting worse by the minute. This is not an easy situation to get out of. Navigating the ruins of Boston is more dangerous than any of these three truly realized. Joel and Tess have decent knowledge of the challenge this task presents, and they do a good job, up to a certain point. Entering the History Museum was a risky move, but also necessary. The other pathway was a death trap. There were far too many infected for even 3 people to fight off. It seems that previously, Joel and Tess have used the History Museum shortcut to cross Boston, but eventually stopped since some infected nested in the building. There are so many other buildings, however, that at least one of them should supply the same advantage. It would have been worth everyone's time to try and find this alternate route. Since the group, or at least Ellie, slept through the night with no problems, it does seem as though any Fedra agents are hot on their trail. If they had been, the group would have been found already. Using this time to scout out a new path with Ellie asleep, or even once she was awake, would have been wise. The group did not do this though, and instead took the risky museum route. All was fine until they reached the top floor. Once those clickers attacked, Joel and Tess fought back beautifully. It might have been more useful to team up, but taking out each clicker one at a time also was not a readily available option. Still, working together might have prevented Tess from being bitten. When Joel and Tess defeat the final clicker and make it out of the History Museum alive, but not well, Tess hides her bite from him. This makes sense as there seems to be little reason to interrupt the mission just yet, but it is somewhat concerning that Joel did not further inspect her or assess the situation. Joel obviously trusts Tess completely, but had he known about her bite, this would have changed things for the better. It's doubtful that Joel would have suddenly turned and shot Ellie, but could have made the decision to leave her in peace. This would have allowed the scene at the Capitol to play out differently. When the group arrive at the Capitol, they see only remnants of Firefly forces. This is a major red flag. Joel smartly investigates the scene and discovers the trail of blood leading inside. Being a man of caution, he likely would have investigated alone, or perhaps not at all. However, Tess's predicament propels her to rush ahead and drag Ellie inside. This sets off the mostly irreversible chain of events that lead to Tess sacrificing herself for the mission. On the other hand, if Tess had been upfront with Joel about her bite, she likely would not still be with the group, and could not rush them in the way she does. Even if she was still along for the ride at this point, since there's not yet a cure for the virus, she would maybe be in less of a rush to turn Ellie over, since the benefits Joel received from the deal no longer apply to herself. This is a tough moment to navigate since emotions are running so high, but Tess's misguided act spirals out of control. As for handling the horde of infected heading towards the capital once Joel shoots the creature already inside, Tess does something harsh but logical. Her death aids Joel and Ellie's escape, and also prevents her from ever turning into a mindless creature. She acts quickly, which gives the other two just enough time to get out. Had Joel and Ellie stayed to fight the horde, they likely would have been overrun and turned into infected themselves, along with Tess. In the woods a few miles outside Boston, Joel contemplates his loss, and Ellie waits for instructions. Finally, Joel emerges from his solitude to continue the trek, but he forbids Ellie from ever mentioning Tess's name. As the two walk on, Ellie questions how the cordyceps pandemic began. Joel explains the most likely theory is the fungus mutated, then entered into the supply chain of a major flower company, which inadvertently shipped infected products all over the globe. This allowed the virus to spread simultaneously in too many places to be contained. He talks about the start of the epidemic when all the civilians were rounded up and told they would go to quarantine facilities. Many, he says, were later killed when there was no room for them. Changing the subject, Ellie questions who Bill and Frank are, just as the two stumble upon a mass grave of murdered civilians. 20 years earlier, Bill hides out from the government at the start of the pandemic. He's a survivalist who, after evading capture, turns his old neighborhood into a fortress. He places traps throughout the surrounding woods, builds a passcode-locked fence, and becomes self-sufficient. A few years into the pandemic, Frank gets stuck in one of Bill's traps. When Bill comes to execute him, Frank pleads for food and shelter, which Bill reluctantly gives. After dinner, the two begin to discuss their loneliness, eventually sleeping together, and Frank decides to stay with Bill for longer. Several years later, Bill and Frank are mostly happily living together and surviving in the fortified neighborhood, when Frank reveals he's made radio contact with someone in Boston. He invites the contact over for a meeting against Bill's wishes. Later, Tess and Joel arrive for dinner. Frank is elated by the company, but Bill is suspicious of the pair, which Joel returns. Over the years, Joel and Tess continue to drop in and trade with Bill and Frank. One night, Frank awakens to the sounds of gunfire outside. He rushes out and sees Bill picking off raiders just outside the fence using a rifle. Bill's other traps, including flamethrowers, take out some of the intruders. In the falling rain, Frank yells at Bill to get back inside, just as Bill gets shot in the abdomen. Frank drags him into the house and begins to operate him on the kitchen table. Bill passes out from the blood loss, but survives. Okay, the preppers do it best. Bill and Frank have an ingenious setup here. They need almost no help from the outside world to meet their basic needs. That did not stop Frank from forming a connection with Tess over the radio, a relationship that would come to save his and Bill's lives. When Tess and Joel have their first meeting with the couple, Bill makes it clear just how much he disapproves of this union. Joel is able to turn the tides in his favor when at the end of the visit, he offers Bill high tensile aluminum for the quarantine zone to help fortify the security fence. Without this material, Joel predicts the fence will only survive a year from this meeting. Thankfully, no one has to find out if that prediction is correct, as Bill takes the material offer and upgrades the fence. This becomes crucial a few years later when raiders try to invade the neighborhood. Bill's meticulous planning gives them the upper hand in this situation. The raiders trip off motion detectors, which turn on flamethrowers of what seem to be Bill's own design. Not only do a few of the raiders catch on fire, but the others cannot cross the electrified fence. That still leaves them able to shoot from a safe distance if they have not yet been incapacitated by the booby traps. When Frank wakes up to the noise of gunfire, he rushes downstairs and arms himself. He grabs a small handgun, which is better than no gun, but perhaps this is a case of bigger being better. We know they have many weapons at their disposal, so Frank could grab a longer ranged weapon to help defend his home. However, this decision is made under duress, and it is more crucial for him to get outside and assess the situation, so he grabs his handgun instead. Outside, Bill is shooting at the raiders with a rifle. This gun makes great sense as it allows him to exchange fire with the raiders from a greater distance. Yet even though he can do this, Bill chooses to fight off the raiders in the middle of the street. This is a poor decision because it gives him no protection from the raiders' gunfire. Where else could Bill have shot at the raiders from? He could have fired at them from his bedroom. That would give him a higher vantage point and thereby perhaps a stable shooting position for greater accuracy. It also gives him cover because of the building. However, the biggest downfall of this locale is that it would put Frank in the line of fire, and Bill certainly would not want that. This does not mean he has no option to shoot from other covered places, such as the downstairs or porch of the house. He could even go to a different building and stake out there. No other people aside from Frank are in this neighborhood, so any other covered spot would be preferable to standing in the street. The rain in this scenario presents another problem, as it's obscuring everyone's vision. This is helpful and harmful to Bill. helpful because it's making it harder for the raiders to hit him, and harmful because it's making it harder for Bill to shoot them. This is probably why Bill goes into the middle of the street like he does. Bill might also be getting a little cocky about his skills in this scenario. When Frank runs out to pull him away from the action, Bill puts up a fight. In the moment, he does not see as much danger as is actually present, and the thrill of having adversaries is clouding his judgment as well. Thankfully, Frank recognizes the real danger of this situation. He could have acted differently had he gotten a different gun and exchanged fire with the raiders, but his love for Bill drags his attention there. This is a fine line to walk. While it's important to take care of the ones you love, it is also important to neutralize the threat. It would be very difficult to successfully do both, so Frank makes the choice to focus on saving Bill. He risks himself by running into the firing zone after Bill gets shot. The bullet that pierces Bill does make Frank's decision for him, as Bill is not much more likely to lose his life since he cannot fight back. The saving grace of the situation remains Bill's own survival instincts. The fortification the fence and flamethrowers provide allow Frank the option to pull focus from the raiders and put it on his lover. While Bill did the heavy lifting of both building the gate and traps years before, he also manages to kill some of the intruders before being incapacitated. His decision years ago to trust Joel and Tess and take the offered aluminum, a decision that likely took a great deal of persuasion from Frank, saves his own life. By having such a strong fence, he can be taken inside and recover without fear of the raiders getting inside, rather than having to risk and likely lose his life to continue to defend his home. Now in 2023, Frank has become resigned to a wheelchair as his body is ravaged by a terminal condition. Bill still cares for him, but life is much harder for the couple. One morning, Bill wakes up to see Frank has removed himself from their bed, and he declares today will be his last day alive. Frank explains that he does not want to burden Bill with his existence anymore, so he asks for a final day together before Bill helps him move on from the mortal coil. The man fights back tears but agrees, and the two spend a tranquil day together, even exchanging wedding rings. That night after dinner, Bill gives Frank poisoned wine as he requests, then reveals that he has done the same for himself. He doesn't want to live in a world without his love, and the two drink the wine, then go into the bedroom for the last time. A few days later, Joel and Ellie arrive at the fortress. The man grows concerned when he sees no sign of Bill or Frank. They enter the house and find a note on the table, which Ellie reads. It's a last will and testament Bill wrote. In it, he reveals that he left supplies for Joel should he ever need them. Joel begins to gather the supplies, including a truck. Both he and Ellie take showers, and the girl steals a small handgun while Joel isn't looking. After paying respects to his friends, the man gets Ellie into the car, and they drive away. Joel and Ellie continue west to find the man's brother, Tommy, who can hopefully help them get the girl to the fireflies and stop frequently to siphon gas from abandoned vehicles. As they drive, Joel explains that Tommy has also had the desire to change the world. Even before the pandemic, he joined the army before becoming disillusioned with it. Once society collapsed, Tommy convinced Joel to travel towards Boston with him. On that journey, they met Tess, and the three eventually formed a tenuous connection with the Fireflies. Now, Tommy has stopped responding on the radio. Joel assumes he has long since left the Fireflies to survive on his own, and vows to search as long as it takes to find him. He and Ellie spend the night in the woods, where Joel warns Ellie that strangers can be even deadlier than the infected. The two begin to bond over a book of puns Ellie picked up along the way. The next morning, they arrive in Kansas City. An underpass cutting through the city's center is blocked by vehicles, so Joel gets off the highway and drives through downtown. Ellie has trouble reading the map, and they find themselves lost. As they pass what used to be the quarantine zone, they notice a lack of Fedra soldiers. Just as Ellie points this out, an injured man appears ahead of them. Immediately sensing a trap, Joel speeds ahead, almost hitting the man, and a raider on top of a building drops a cinder block on the truck's hood. The truck drives over a strip of tire spikes and careens into a store. The raiders begin to shoot at Joel and Ellie, who climb out of the vehicle and take shelter. Joel begins returning fire and instructs Ellie to climb through a hole in the wall to a secluded room. She does this as Joel kills one of the raiders. He takes out a second raider, and the third man runs to the store. The two get into a brutal fight for survival, but the raider gets the upper hand and starts choking Joel with his rifle. Ellie pulls out her knife, but then thinks better of it and gets the handgun she stole from Frank. She climbs back into the store and shoots the raider in the back. Getting the upper hand, Joel turns the tables on the man as the raider begs for his life. He pleads and says he won't tell anyone they're in the city. Joel tells Ellie to go back into hiding, and once she does, he uses the raider's own knife to kill him. Okay, you're gonna need another car. This is a terrible situation Joel and Ellie have found themselves in. There was no way that they could have known the situation in Kansas City, right? Well, except that later on, we find out that Joel has long heard tell of the Fedra forces of Kansas City being particularly nasty towards their civilians. To Joel's knowledge, Fedra would still be in control of the city and acting meanly towards the people, so why go through Kansas City at all? Joel and Ellie are now heading to Wyoming, having started in Massachusetts. Going through Kansas is not necessary for this journey. It would be possible for them to drive through Nebraska and would even be a more direct route to their destination than passing through Kansas. We do not know exactly how many quarantine zones exist, nor how widespread Fedra is throughout the country, but if rumors of a particular quarantine zone being so despicable spread halfway across the continent, it isn't worth passing through. Yet Joel has driven to Kansas City. The intention to swiftly pass through by driving on the highways is a smart one, because we want to spend as little time in the city as possible. Sadly, this plan is thrown off course by an underpass blockage. Joel decides to turn the truck around and access a different highway. This was likely the best plan, since the blockage could be a raider trap or simply make them too noticeable to any Fedra forces that might be about. This is a situation where time is of the essence, both in their overall quest to get Ellie to the Firefly forces and Joel trying to find Tommy, as well as their immediate task of getting through this dangerous city. When trying to find a new route, Joel should have avoided going through the city at all. Ellie is not the most skilled with maps because, in her own words, this is her second day in a car. Joel should have looked at the map himself to devise a clear path of where to drive. If he backtracked out of Kansas City, he could have used service roads to bypass the entire place. This would take longer as it's less direct, requiring more twists and turns, but again, avoiding the city would almost guarantee the safest passage possible. It's doubtful that any raiders, Fedra agents, or rebels are as concerned with the very outskirts of the city, much less a single vehicle passing by. Cutting through the city presents a new array of problems, namely these raiders. Their ambush tactic is obvious to anyone with the knowledge of the evil in people, which Joel is. It's good to know that he recognizes so clearly what is going on when the injured man begins to call for help. It is also nice of him to tell Ellie to put on her seatbelt before he guns the truck at the man. Going full speed into a trap is unnecessary, however. It is obvious that there are other streets where they could take, and would avoid the ambush altogether. Going further had the unfortunate effect of subjecting their vehicle to both a cinder block thrashed into the hood, and tires being blown out by tire spikes. It does not appear that these raiders are working for any large group, which, if that's the case, then they are probably only setting traps on this single street. So again, the best option is to swiftly find another way around. Now, once Joel and Ellie are in the thick of this ambush, Joel handles the situation well. He gets Ellie to safety as soon as possible, and manages to exterminate two of the raiders without getting close to fighting them. Ellie also does the proper thing by not abandoning Joel in his moment of need. Had she remained behind the wall indefinitely during the fight, Joel most likely would have been killed by his attacker. Elsewhere in the city, Kathleen, the leader of a group of rebels that have overthrown the Fedra outpost, interrogates a man. This doctors information on the whereabouts of an escaped rebel, Henry, but he refuses to give up the information even with a gun to his head. As she's about to kill him, Kathleen is interrupted by a guard who tells her they found out someone has murdered their men. She goes outside to see the bodies of the raiders that Joel killed. Using the fear of the other rebels, she motivates them to tear apart the city to find Henry. Then she returns to the interrogation center and shoots the doctor point blank. Meanwhile, Joel and Ellie hide in a new location as the rebels' convoy drives by. While they wait, Joel instructs Ellie on how to properly handle a handgun. He expresses guilt over forcing her into a killing situation, even though she didn't end the man's life, and the girl reveals it wasn't her first time killing someone. In another part of the city, the rebels find a house where Henry and his brother Sam had been staying. After looking around, Kathleen concludes the pair are almost out of food and will soon try to raid the group's supplies. She tells her forces to ramp up security and to protect their storage of food. Then, she and her right-hand man, Perry, go into the basement of the building. Entering an abandoned storage room, they see the ground has caved in, but something beneath it is moving, almost like it's breathing. She tells Perry to keep this a secret from the rest of the group, promising they'll deal with it after they find Henry and Sam. That night, Joel and Ellie make their way to the top of a skyscraper. They plan to spend the night there, then use the vantage point to find a way out of the city in the morning. After climbing more than 30 flights of stairs, they decide to rest. Being cautious, Joel sprinkles broken glass in front of the door, so they will hear intruders. Then, the two fall asleep. Later that night, Ellie wakes Joel up to see two survivors, Henry and Sam, pointing their weapons at them. 2 weeks earlier, the people of Kansas City overthrew their local Fedra regime. While the masses celebrated, Henry and his deaf younger brother Sam avoided resistance trucks in the streets. They make their way to meet Edelstein, a man who helps hide them until they can find their way out of the city. Meanwhile, Kathleen rounds up a group of collaborators, those who spy on their neighbors on behalf of Fedra. She interrogates them for information on Henry and Sam, which one person eventually gives. He informs her that they've gone into hiding with Edelstein's help. Kathleen orders all the collaborators killed and heads to find them. 10 days pass, and Edelstein has vanished, leaving Henry and Sam without help or a plan. The older brother decides they must make a run for themselves. As they prepare to do so, Joel and Ellie have their run-in with the raiders across the street. After the shootout ends and the sounds of gunfire stops, Henry devises a plan to get out of the city. That night, he and Sam sneak into the building where Joel and Ellie are sleeping. He holds them at gunpoint mind, while explaining their need to team up. He knows the city and the escape route. Joel, without much choice, agrees, and they share a meal. In the morning, Henry explains his plan. They'll use the sewer tunnels to sneak into the suburbs, then cross the river, and they're all out of Kansas City. He explains that Fedra drove the infected underground at the start of the outbreak, and there's been no sign of them since. People have been afraid to venture to the sewers, but a Fedra contact informed him that the tunnels were actually clear of the infected. Joel distrusts the plan, but sees no other choice, and they all head to the sewers. Inside, they find a clear passage, just as promised. After trekking through the underground tunnel a while, they stop to wait until dark to exit the sewers. While they wait, Henry explains why he and Sam are so wanted by the Resistance. Years ago, Henry fell in with the Resistance and was willing to do anything necessary to overthrow Fedra, but then Sam fell ill with leukemia. The only medicine that would treat him was rare, so Fedra asked Henry to give them something equally valuable in return. Henry ratted on the leader of the Resistance, who was captured and executed. This paved the way for his sister, Kathleen, to take over and use the anger caused by this crime to push the Resistance to end the fight. Now she wants revenge on them both. Above ground, Harry finds Kathleen to give a status update. The Resistance cannot locate Henry or Sam, sensing that her forces are having doubts about her as their leader. The woman explains that the loss of her brother has not weakened her resolve. She was always more decisive and violent than him. When she visited him before his execution, he asked her not to seek revenge, but she wants nothing more than to see Henry and Sam dead. That night, the 4 survivors leave the sewers and arrive in the suburbs. Ellie and Sam begin to let their guards down as they approach the edge of the city. Suddenly, someone begins firing at them. Taking cover behind a vehicle, Joel spots the sniper at the top of a mansion at the end of the street. He instructs the others to stay put while he sneaks his way into the house. He heads towards the building as fast as he can, entering the room with the shooter, and opens the door to see an elderly man with a gun. Joel begs the man not to shoot, but the rebel tries to get a shot off, so Joel kills him. That's when he hears Kathleen's voice on the man's radio, revealing that she and the Resistance are almost upon them. Joel yells down for Henry, Sam, and Ellie to run for cover, just as the Resistance convoy arrives. Joel begins firing at the driver of the plow vehicle, and manages to kill her, causing the truck to crash into a building. With their targets cornered, the rest of the Resistance climb out of their vehicles, and Kathleen calls out for Henry to surrender. Henry tries to negotiate with her for the other's safety from his hiding place, but knows she will never listen to reason. He tells Ellie to run with Sam to safety on his mark. Then he stands up and surrenders. Kathleen moves closer to shoot him when the plow truck suddenly sinks into the ground. From the sinkhole bursts a massive horde of the infected, and they charge at the humans as chaos breaks out. Henry, Sam, and Ellie use the distraction to make a run for safety, while the Resistance begin fighting for their lives. Ellie climbs to a car to avoid the horde before a small infected child creeps in and lunges at her. She manages to get out and trap the girl in there without any harm. Joel takes out some infected from his vantage point as Ellie moves across the street. Henry and Sam are trapped under a car as 2 infected claw at them. Acting quickly, Ellie stabs both creatures, allowing the boys to escape. From the sinkhole emerges a grotesque bulbous infected, which begins tearing through the Resistance. Perry forces Kathleen to run as the bloater approaches and attacks him, tearing his head from his body. Ellie, Henry, and Sam make it to the front steps of the house at the same time as Kathleen, who pulls her gun on them again. Just as she prepares to shoot Henry, a creature pounces on her from behind, killing her. With nobody coming after them, the trio run out of there as fast as they can and escape with Joel. That night, the group takes shelter in an abandoned hotel. Ellie and Sam read comic books, while Joel and Henry discuss their next moves. He invites Henry and Sam to continue with them to Wyoming, which Henry accepts. Before going to sleep, Sam reveals a small bite on his leg to Ellie. Hoping she can help, the girl explains that her blood has a cure in it, and smears some of her blood on his wound without ever telling anyone that he's been bitten before going to sleep. In the morning, Ellie wakes up to see Sam sitting strangely on the bed. She goes over to check on him, but is attacked. They tumble into the other room, waking up Joel and Henry. The older brother immediately grabs a gun and shoots the creature, but then realizes it was his own brother. He begins panicking as Joel tries to talk him down, but he fails, and Henry dies, leaving the survivors alone. Okay, this is one of the most upsetting things that could have happened. Henry, Sam, Joel, and Ellie have not done everything right, but they did do a lot of things well, particularly in the showdown with Kathleen, which became interrupted by the peekaboo-infected horde. The group still held their own and made smart decisions. Prior to that moment, Ellie should have been quieter so as to not attract attention to the group. Joel uncharacteristically did not try to calm her down as she made their presence known in the suburbs, likely because he felt out of danger and Henry and Sam's company was growing on him. Then, the elderly man started shooting, and things escalated very quickly. It was genius of Joel to remain in the house as he did, so that he could use this view to protect the rest of the crew. His position was fairly hard to hit and kept him protected from the infected. With that said, the others should have run into the woods, rather than straight towards the house when Joel told them to move. Seeking shelter was more useful in this moment than staying in the open. Kathleen and the rebels would have eventually gone into the woods looking for them, but perhaps not before the infected made their presence known. The 3 of them could have snuck around towards the bridge through these woods, and met with Joel in more secrecy in safety this way. At least Henry was able to stall for enough time for the infected to come and spice up the party. Once the horde broke out, everyone played their cards as best as possible. The scene was so chaotic that it is highly unlikely Sam would have gone out without being bitten. After the group reunited and made their way to the hotel, Joel should have checked everyone for injuries. He has done this many times after any violent action, and having done so then would have prevented a death. Again, there was nothing to be done for Sam after being bitten, though Ellie valiantly tried. But had others known about Sam's infection, things would have turned out differently. Henry would have panicked, but it is doubtful that Joel would have immediately turned his weapons against him and Sam. Taking risks with an infected person has not yet panned out, so Joel would not have wanted to keep Sam around, but if Henry had more clarity on the situation, he could have reacted better. Killing anyone would be hard. Killing your own sibling would be near impossible. Henry might have chosen to relieve Sam of the life of an infected, but could have had more time to process these emotions since it took several hours for Sam to complete a transformation. Even that much longer could have saved Henry's life. He's a capable survivor and has a good head on his shoulders, but having made such a horrific decision under duress messed with his logical thinking, leading to his sudden death. Henry would have been a valuable asset to Joel and Ellie, but unfortunately in the heat of the moment, he did not listen to reason. He didn't fail anyone because Sam being bitten was not his fault, but he did fail himself in not being able to help the group take Ellie to the Fireflies, who might be able to find a cure. Later, Joel buries both bodies, and Ellie packs their bags. She refuses to talk about what happened, and instead just makes Joel point them in the right direction. They continue their trek now on foot towards Wyoming, unsure of what else lies in their path, but one thing is certain: Pedro Pascal is definitely a daddy. The vicious cordyceps infection turning humans into terrifyingly fast zombies keeps spreading with ferocity across the globe, but that's no longer your biggest threat. There are bloodthirsty survivors at every turn, ready to rob you blind and stab you in the throat. How can you ever hope to survive? I'm here to break down the successes, failures, and how to beat the apocalypse survivors in The Last of Us Season 1, Part 2. 3 months after surviving the harrowing horde attack in Kansas City, Joel and Ellie have made their way to Wyoming. They've become lost in the snow-covered woods, so they make a stop in an isolated cabin where an older couple lives. After separately interrogating the couple, Joel finds out they're very close to where he suspects Tommy lives. The couple warn Joel and Ellie not to venture beyond the nearby river, as those who do have yet to come back. Something worse than the infected reside there. As they leave the couple's cabin, Joel slows and grabs at his chest, having trouble breathing and experiencing heart palpitations. After a moment, they dissipate, and he continues on, not explaining his pains to Ellie. Joel and Ellie venture forward, trekking on foot through the forest. One night while camping, Ellie asks Joel what he most desires to do after the apocalypse is cured. He would own a sheep ranch and live in solitude, he explains. Ellie, on the other hand, says she wants to visit the moon. Then she reveals her doubt that a vaccine can be created from her blood, after she failed to stop Sam from becoming infected in Kansas City. Joel reassures her that the Fireflies know what they are doing. The next day, when they approach the forewarned river, a gang of weapon-saddled horseback riders surround them. A man demands to know their intentions, which Joel lies about in order to conceal Ellie's purpose as the potential cure to the cordyceps infection. A dog is released to sniff out if either of them have been bitten, and Joel tenses up to fight the gang as the dog nears Ellie, but she distracts it with pets and kisses. Then, the leader stops the hostilities to ask Joel his name. Hearing it, she takes him and Ellie into their camp. Their camp is a fortified town in the mountains. As they pass to the center, Joel spots Tommy working on repairing a building. Tommy rushes down, and they are reunited. Maria, the horseback leader, takes the group inside the mess hall to eat. It's there that Joel finds out that Tommy and Maria are married. The couple take them on a tour, revealing that the town was previously a gated community that was abandoned in 2003 after the cordyceps outbreak. 7 years prior, Maria and a group of others began settling the area. It is home to more than 300 people. The government operates as a communist system, with Maria being one of the elected board members. The residents must keep to themselves, however, so as to not attract unwanted attention and invite raiding on the commune. Maria takes Ellie to clean up, as Tommy and Joel discuss their lives of the past several years. Joel confronts Tommy about his radio silence. After leaving the Fireflies, Tommy was rescued by the communists, who insisted that he remain as reclusive as possible to keep the commune safe. He reveals that he and Maria are expecting a child, so he lives his entire life much more cautiously, which has led him to losing contact with his brother. Joel cannot bring himself to congratulate Tommy on his expected child, instead promising to leave in the morning with Ellie. He storms out of the bar, but then begins to experience heart palpitations again. He sees a girl who looks like his daughter, which calms his pains. Ellie finishes getting showered and changed, and meets Maria, who offers her a haircut. As the two talk, Ellie brings up a small memorial in the house for 2 deceased children. Maria explains that one of them was her child, the other was Joel's. After seeing Ellie process this new information, Maria warns her to be careful who she puts her faith in. That evening, Joel and Tommy talk in secret. Joel asks his brother to take over his mission to deliver Ellie for him. Their new plan is to head a few days further west to an abandoned Colorado university where fireflies have supposedly staked out. But Joel is plagued by fears of failing Ellie and memories of his daughter's death in his arms, which Joel witnessed. He explains Ellie's true purpose to Tommy, who reluctantly agrees to take her in the morning. Joel goes to Ellie's room to tell her the new plan, but she overheard the conversation between him and Tommy. They argue about it, but ultimately Joel walks out, content with his decision. That night, he again dreams of his dead daughter. The next morning, Ellie and Tommy head to the stables where they meet Joel. He explains he came to steal a horse and leave before the others, so as to avoid saying goodbye, but feels he owes Ellie a choice of guardian. She immediately chooses him over Tommy, and they say their goodbyes before heading out. After several days, Joel and Ellie make it to Colorado. They find the abandoned university, but only traces of the fireflies, not the actual rebels. They search the building, seeing damaged medical equipment and a scribbled packing list. Alarmed by a noise from upstairs, they head towards it and find only some wild testing monkeys. Looking around, they discover a map pinned to a corkboard and deduce the rebels headed to Salt Lake City. That's when the survivors hear a noise and look out the window to see a gang of 4 raiders heading into their building. They sneak out back, but as soon as they get to their horse, a raider charges at them. He swings a baseball bat at Joel, who dodges it, and it breaks against a tree. Joel tackles the attacker into a chokehold as Ellie aims her gun. Joel snaps the man's neck and drops his body, but then they notice the broken bat lodged into Joel's abdomen. He pulls it out and stumbles towards the horse as the other 3 raiders charge their way. Jumping onto the animal, Joel spurs it off as Ellie fires at the attackers. They manage to get away swiftly. Later, the horse slows down near a train track. Joel falls off and becomes wounded on the ground. Ellie tries to suppress the bleeding, but finds herself hopeless as Joel slips out of consciousness. Okay, Joel is on the verge of truly sacrificing his life for Ellie's survival. That's a noble move, but an unplanned one. It may be even unnecessary had different choices been made prior to this trek to Colorado. Ellie's choice to go with Joel instead of Tommy to Colorado is one made purely out of emotion. It's not a bad choice per se, but could have been more rationally made. Joel is very clear about his shortcomings and fear of failure. While not all of this is inherently irrational either, it should still be taken more carefully into consideration. Joel has been capable of protecting Ellie so far, though there have been half a dozen close calls. She also trusts him, which is a valuable connection she does not share with Tommy, having just met him the day before. As Joel expresses doubts about his ability to continue providing for Ellie, the safest choice becomes a team-up between the brothers. Though Tommy does not truly want to journey to Colorado, it seems he's willing to do so out of compassion for his brother. Joel cannot bring himself to abandon Ellie either, so all 3 of them should make the journey, right? This provides lots of advantages for everyone. The presence of 3 people with weapons and training offers more safety than only 2. If the journey was as safe as Tommy promised Joel it would be, then this is over-planning. But if the journey proves more dangerous, this could save someone's life. Once the group reaches the university and discovers that the fireflies have fled the scene, it would be much more challenging for the raiders to injure anyone. Simple math in this scenario puts the fight as 3 against 4, rather than 2 against 4. The group would likely still be able to sneak out of the building, but when the raider comes to attack, he will have to battle both Joel and Tommy. One of them could disarm the raider, while the other tackles him. As a team that has previously murdered people together, Joel and Tommy understand each other's methods and mannerisms. In a flight or fight scenario, this is invaluable. Even prior to being attacked by the raiders, having another person to keep watch while the university is explored. After the attack, Tommy does not need to continue on with Ellie and Joel to Salt Lake City. Though this would continue to benefit them, he could return to Maria having saved his brother's life. Back at the commune, Joel explained Ellie's importance to the survival of humanity, so if Ellie were to ask, it's almost a given that Tommy would come along. It's too bad she doesn't. On their own, their sneaking out of the building leads to Joel only having to fend off one raider rather than the group. This is a much smarter idea than attempting to hide from the gang, which would have meant staying indoors and limiting escape routes. Had Ellie shot the attacking raider as soon as he appeared, he would have at least been stalled in swinging the baseball bat. The immediacy of the attack threw everyone off, allowing the man time to swing and miss and turn his blunt instrument into a shiv. Joel should have tried to defend himself in a way that allowed there to be more space between him and the man, rather than attacking him. This space would have allowed himself, but more likely Ellie to fire at the raider and hopefully take him out without stabbing anyone. Once someone has a sharp instrument, it becomes imperative to stay away. The raider's swing and miss with a bat did turn the weapon more deadly, but also limited its use to something even closer range. When Joel attacked, he should have focused on the weapon in the raider's hand. Disarming him is more important than fully neutralizing him at this moment. Joel obviously wants to preserve as much of Ellie's innocence as possible by not forcing her to kill people, but exceptions must be made. Her shot would not even need to be fatal, as Joel proves himself capable of killing someone without a weapon. She would only need to inflict enough pain to distract the man long enough to be disarmed and left in the dust. Ellie drags Joel into a house near the train tracks, leading the horse into the basement as well. Ellie tries to apply pressure to his stab wound as Joel weakly pushes her away. He can barely speak, but tells her to leave him to die, insisting she go and find Tommy. Ignoring him, she races through the house looking for medical supplies, but is reminded of her past. In the time prior to meeting Joel, Ellie lived in the quarantine zone of Boston under the supervision of Fedra. She got bullied by some of the other girls, which often ended her up in trouble with the captain, and he attempted to get Ellie to fall in line by showing her the future she can have as a Fedra leader. That night, Ellie moped in her room when her friend Riley snuck into the room. She disappeared several weeks before, leading everyone to assume she was dead. As Ellie confronted her about her whereabouts, Riley admitted that she joined the Fireflies. They argued about the morals of the rebel group, with Ellie thinking they're nothing but selfish terrorists, preventing Fedra from restoring peace. Riley insisted they go on a trip together until she finally convinced Ellie to join her for an adventure. Begrudgingly, Ellie followed Riley out of the room and across town. On the way through Boston, they came across a dead body, from which they stole a bottle of liquor, before the corpse fell through the decaying building's floor. On the rooftop, they shared the liquor. Then, Riley pointed out a mall, which Ellie refused to enter because of rumors of an infected horde inside. Riley assured her of its safety and that there are 4 wonders she will show her tonight. They climbed down through a hole in the ceiling, entering the control room. Riley turned on the power in the building, lighting up the decrepit mall. It's the most amazing thing Ellie has seen, and the girl is blown away by an escalator, proclaiming it the 5th wonder of the mall. As Riley leads Ellie to the first stop, they pass by a lingerie store. They discuss the overconsumption of the 2000s before the cordyceps mutated. Riley makes a flirty comment about imagining Ellie in the lingerie. Ellie is guided to a carousel, which amazes her. The 2 girls got on to ride the horses and shared longing glances. Riley began to talk again about the Firefly Rebellion, explaining how they have taken power back for the people in some cities. Ellie asked her to come back and rejoin Fedra to restore peace that way. Riley revealed that before running away, she found out what her Fedra job assignment would be: sewage duty. She would be resigned to overseeing menial tasks with Fedra, but with the Fireflies, she was given responsibility and meaning. She won't return to being overlooked. They moved on to the next wonder of the mall, a photo booth. Inside, they gave stupid poses for the camera. Even though the photo strip was printed in faded ink, Ellie kept it anyway. The third wonder of the mall was the arcade. It's here that Riley and Ellie duked it out playing Mortal Kombat over and over, Ellie slowly getting better at defeating Riley. Elsewhere in the mall, a lone infected was awakened by the noise. After the arcade, they moved into a storage room where Riley had been camping out for the past weeks. She gave Ellie a gift, a book of puns. Then, Ellie notices a small supply of handmade explosives in the corner and realized Riley was fully committed to the Fireflies' cause. Riley quickly defended the movement, saying she would never allow them to bomb anywhere near Ellie and never let her be hurt. But Ellie knew there was no way for Riley to secure this. She was just a lowly player in the rebellion. The girl walks away, but her friend follows after her and reveals that tonight was her last night in Boston before being relocated tomorrow to a new Firefly post. She tried convincing her boss Marlene to allow Ellie to come, but the woman refused to let her join. Heartbroken, Ellie stormed out of the mall. As she almost made it to the exit, she decided to turn back and see her best friend one final time. But then she heard screaming. Running through the maze of displays, she came upon a Halloween store. A mechanical toy made the screams, but Ellie finds Riley curled up by the display. She moved to comfort her, saying how much she'll miss her. Riley attempted to redeem the night with a final wonder, and the 2 donned masks and danced on the display case. As they got closer, Ellie stopped dancing and took off her mask. Riley did the same and the girl asked her not to go. This time, Riley agreed and they kissed. Just as they parted lips, a crashing sound alerted them to something heading their way. At that moment, an infected burst into the store. Riley fired her pistol at it, knocking it down and giving them time to run. But the infected quickly caught up to them and pounced on Riley, knocking her down. Ellie grappled with the creature, stabbing it repeatedly in the side before being cornered against the display case. Riley regained her footing, grabbed a metal rod, and began to attack the monster. Using the distraction, Ellie impaled the creature's head with her pocket knife, killing it. She looked towards Riley to celebrate their victory, but Riley only stared at Ellie's arm. The creature bit her. Then she holds up her own bite on her hand. Ellie began destroying the store as Riley sank to the floor in defeat. Finally, Ellie joins her, and the 2 discuss their options. Either they take the easy way out, or wait until they turn into monsters together. Riley quickly throws out the first plan. Instead, they hold each other tight as they brace for their bodies to turn against them. In 2023, Ellie races through the house, searching for anything to help her stop Joel's bleeding. Finally, she finds a needle and thread in a drawer and rushes back down to Joel. He can barely move as she uncovers his stab wound and begins to stitch it back together. In a building somewhere in the wintry Colorado landscape, a man reads from the Bible to a group of mourners. He comforts a crying girl, assuring her that God will dry her tears and there will be no suffering for the dead. The girl asks when they can bury her father's body, which the man, David, says cannot happen until the spring when the ground is softer. The funeral disbands and David talks with his right-hand man, James, outside. James expresses the people's concerns over their diminishing food supply and makes it clear they're afraid, but David assures them he will find a way out if they stick with him. As the days pass, Joel's condition worsens. Ellie is running out of food. She takes matters into her own hands, using Joel's rifle to go hunting. In the snowy woods, she spots a deer grazing some yards away. She creeps into position, slows her breathing, and fires. The deer is hit, but manages to run away. Ellie follows its blood trail through the forest, but she doesn't get to the animal first. David and James find the deer corpse near an abandoned building and debate if they should try to steal it before the hunter comes along. Before they can take action, Ellie comes out from the trees, rifle aimed at their heads, yelling at them to back away. David begins to negotiate. He explains his tribe is starving and that they will be glad to trade supplies for some of the deer meat. Ellie lies that she's from a large group in need, but also sees a chance to save Joel, so she agrees to split the carcass in exchange for medicine. David takes the deal and instructs James to head back to town and get penicillin for her. After James leaves, David offers to build a fire while they wait. Ellie instructs him to drag the animal inside the building, then stokes the flame. Inside the shack, David tries to question Ellie about her situation, but she refuses to divulge anything. He tells her about how he found religion after the apocalypse. He never wanted to lead the group, but they elected him and set on their journey after their quarantine zone fell. Ellie questions his belief that everything happens for a reason, but he counters with an example. A few weeks prior, he sent a group of 4 to a nearby Colorado town to search for food. Only 3 came back, claiming the 4th member had been murdered by a man traveling with a young girl. Ellie realizes he means Joel and her, but before she can react, he yells to James to lower his gun. Ellie whips around to see he's returned and is ready to kill her. David commands James to lower his gun and give Ellie the medicine. She takes it and runs off, leaving the deer carcass behind. James questions David's intent, but the man already has a plan. Ellie hurries back to Joel and frantically tries to decipher how to use the penicillin. She administers some right into his wound and then lays down next to him. In the town, dinner is prepared for the survivors there, and a man brings in a container of meat. The cook questions its contents, but he assures her it's venison. Thinking nothing of it, she adds it to the stew, with no idea it's human flesh. David and James drag the deer into the mess hall. The rest of the group looks on with confusion. The pastor confirms the rumors of Joel and Ellie, making it clear they'll be hunted down tomorrow. The murdered father's child shouts that they should kill the pair, but David walks over to the table, shoving her out of the chair, then sits for dinner and eats the stew. Meanwhile, Ellie administers Joel another penicillin shot and gives the horse water, but as she's taking in the scenery, she sees a flock of nearby birds flying away. It's a sign somebody has come, and she sneaks outside to survey the danger, spotting David's group of hunters. Terrified, she runs back down to the basement where she's keeping Joel. Giving him a knife, she tries to wake him, but he can barely open his eyes. She tells him of the danger and that she will try to lead the hunters away from here, but he must defend himself if anyone finds him. She goes back upstairs and blocks the basement door with furniture. She mounts her horse and comes upon the group from behind. She fires her pistol at them and gallops away, while David instructs the group to capture her alive. The men scatter and Ellie rides through the neighborhood, exchanging gunfire. One of the men shoots her horse, throwing Ellie off and knocking her nearly unconscious. The men come over, and David and James take Ellie back to town, while the others stay to look for Joel. Okay, run, Ellie, run. Ellie is more on her own than she's ever been. With Joel nearly comatose in the basement, she has to use only her wits to save the both of them. When Ellie met David and James the day before, she made a good deal to get penicillin for Joel. Getting the penicillin was a double-edged sword in many ways. Yes, she could save Joel's life, but as a side effect of the trade, she had to spend an uncomfortable amount of time with David. This was her only viable option to prevent Joel's death. Simply waiting on him to naturally recover would not have worked in their favor. Unfortunately, She also lost all the deer meat and alerted David to her and Joel's existence. However, these were not wasted moments. They provided her with crucial information, though she didn't have the forethought to use it. David's comments about the death of their group member whom Joel killed should have been a flashing siren to Ellie that danger was on her doorstep, especially once David let her go with the medicine, and this move makes little practical sense. David's cult is suffering and short on supplies. A tactful leader would find a way to get the deer for food and keep the medicine for whenever it's needed. Had Ellie been able to assess the situation from a calmer vantage, she would have seen that she had far from seen the last of David. Knowing this, she should have spent the night preparing. Joel has a map that he's been using throughout his journey. While Ellie is not the most skilled with maps, as we learned right before things took a sharp turn towards the gutter in Kansas City, she has some competency. When David offers to make Ellie a fire while they wait for the penicillin, he mentions that the walkabout to town is about 4 miles. Using Joel's map, Ellie can look for all the possible towns within the radius from her position. She can also plan an escape route, while she's only got her best guess right now as to the precise location of David and his gang. Understanding the distance they're willing to travel for their revenge is enough to spur her own movement. If she had paid enough attention to James's trip to get the penicillin, she could even estimate how fast the group coming to kill her would be. Of course, Joel can't be left for dead, but that's where the horse comes in. The hardest method of transporting Joel would be to get him on the horse, though once he's mounted, this will be the fastest method. Still, it requires Ellie to move him out of the basement and lift him onto horseback. Unless there's a secret levee in the house, that's not happening. Instead, she could fashion a sort of sled out of the mattress Joel is sleeping on, or a chair or other furniture from any of these neighborhood houses. Attach the sled to the back of the horse and you're in business. A potential snag of this plan is that if Ellie drags Joel's body behind the horse, there will be noticeable tracks, making it easier for David and his followers to find them. She can counter this in a few ways. First, she can attach a branch or other natural materials to the shed. These will drag across the ground and overturn the snow in a more natural way, hopefully making the tracks harder to spot. Second, every few yards, Ellie could dismount the horse, then overturn the tracks in the snow herself, again with a branch or other tools. Either of these methods would only be necessary until they make it out of the neighborhood. Once they reach the woods, the trail will become much harder to pick up since there are no longer wide open stretches of undisturbed snow. Finally, Ellie could simply not worry about turning over the snow at all and focus on making as much headway against the attackers as possible. The snowfall during the night might help prevent such easy tracking, but this plan is the flimsiest of all. Presumably, Ellie and Joel are also not far from the train tracks where Joel collapsed from blood loss. They can use these to their advantage. If Ellie can transport Joel to the train tracks, getting away will be much easier. The tracks provide a completely clear and direct pathway for them to get the hell out of Dodge. David and his followers might assume Ellie would take the train track because of its convenience. However, the horse's tracks would be harder to notice on a railroad. Plus, the mattress Joel is sleeping on is likely just smaller than the width of the tracks. This would allow for easy, albeit bumpy passage, with Joel's mattress dragging behind the horse and smoothing out its tracks. The railroad will eventually lead to somewhere safer, and the bumpy nature of this or any of the methods of travel will likely help wake Joel up. If worse came to worse for Ellie, and she was unable to move Joel, she could still fight off her attackers. Getting them as far away from Joel as possible is the right move, but could be executed differently. When Ellie draws their attention to her via gunshots, she uses her pistol, but Joel has brought a rifle along for this entire journey, so why not use that? Using the rifle provides multiple advantages. Primarily, it allows Ellie to fire from a further distance and with more accuracy. Her hunting has proven that while she's not the most skilled marksman, she can kill a slow enough target. David and his men are trying to be stealthy, so they enter the neighborhood slowly. These few moments are the perfect opportunity for Ellie to hold up inside any other house and fire away. In reality, she only has one shot before the men scatter, but if she plays her cards right, that shot will give her one less target to worry about. If she has to choose, go for David. He's the leader, and the starving, confused followers might be less inclined to kill her once their leader is dead. After her position is compromised, Ellie can still use the advantage of that house to attempt to take more of the gang out. After that, she can switch to the pistol for more agility and close-range gunfire. Here, she can use the horse in multiple ways. One option is to release the horse as a distraction to the group and shoot at them while they're confused about where the threat is coming from. The better option is to have the horse waiting nearby, and as soon as she kills David, hop on the animal and become a swiftly moving target, much like she ended up doing. With their leader dead and their target difficult to kill, the men will undoubtedly struggle, and taking more casualties might not be worth it. Even if this is not what happens, Ellie is now in a much better position to fight off the attackers because she planned out her offense rather than being taken by surprise. In the basement, Joel wakes up as he hears movement from upstairs. One of David's men has entered the house and spots the out-of-place furniture. He pushes it back to reveal the stairs to the basement. He makes his way down and spots the mattress where Joel slept, but it's empty. Looking around, the man is suddenly attacked from behind. They struggle as the man tries to turn his gun on Joel, but he stabs him in the neck and they both collapse to the ground. In town, Ellie wakes up in a cell and sees David, who tells her that he will not harm her if she joins him. She refuses to join as he starts asking her questions about herself, and she insists that her protector will come for her. David assures her they will find the man, and after that, she will be alone unless she changes her mind. In the neighborhood, another member of the group searches the backyards of houses and stumbles upon the body of his friend. Suddenly, Joel attacks and knocks the man out. Later, he wakes up restrained to a piano, while Joel holds a knife over his friend who's tied to a chair. The man says he doesn't know anything about Ellie, so Joel stabs him in the knee. He asks again, and this time the man tells him she's been taken into town. Joel rips the knife out of his knee and sticks it in his mouth. He tells him to use it to point to the town on the map, but promises that if he gives a different answer than his friend, Joel will kill them both. The man does what Joel asks before the survivor fatally stabs him in the stomach. He walks to the other man, who begs for his life, but Joel bludgeons him to death. Meanwhile, Ellie tries to unlock her cell when she notices a human ear on the floor and realizes what these people have been eating to survive. At that moment, David walks in with food, but the girl kicks it away, screaming at him that he's a cannibal. He admits that recently, he has switched the group over to human meat without telling them, but only because their supplies have run out. Trying to appeal to her, David tells Ellie that he senses a leader within her strong resolve and violent nature. He insists it's these qualities that have convinced him she should join him in leading the group, and promises to spare Joel if she does. Ellie gets close to David and places her hands around his in between the cell bars. Then she snaps back one of his fingers, breaking it. In the scuffle, she tries and fails to grab his keys. Furious, he runs out of the room, clutching his injured finger. Outside, Joel staggers into the town. He makes his way into a building and finds Ellie's backpack, then sees the headless corpses of the town's dead strung up to dry. At the same time, David storms back into the cell room with James and grabs a hold of the girl, intending on butchering her. Ellie panics and screams that she's infected. Both men pause and David calls her a liar, but she tells them to check her arm. He sets down his butcher's knife and pulls back her sleeve to reveal the bite. David's own hand is bleeding from Ellie biting him, and James backs away from them both. Ellie grabs the butcher knife and swings it into James's neck. She runs out of the room with David on her trail. She makes it into the dining area and tries to escape out the front door, but it's locked. Heading back into the kitchen, she grabs a smoldering log from the grill and hides in the dining room. When David enters, she chucks the wood at him, and he ducks out of the way, but it lands next to a curtain, setting it on fire. David debates on putting out the flames, but decides to find Ellie first. She sneaks around the room looking for a way out, but all the doors are locked. David taunts her, revealing he has the key as the building starts to burn. Sneaking into the kitchen, she finds a knife and prepares to attack. When David gets close enough to her hiding place, she lunges at him and stabs the man in his side. He drops his meat cleaver and throws her to the ground. As he stumbles forward, Ellie spots the butcher's knife under a table, but can't quite reach it. That's when David climbs on top of her, stopping the girl, and she screams for help, as David tells her that he's going to enjoy what happens next. Ellie grabs the knife and swings it straight into the man's head. His body falls down to the floor, and the girl stabs his body repeatedly until he's dead. Stumbling out of the building, Ellie walks out into the snow when Joel grabs her by the shoulder, who in her state of panic does not realize who he is. She fights him, but he holds her until Ellie understands that she's safe. He reassures the girl that he'll keep her safe and gives her his coat before the two head towards the edge of town. Several years ago, a woman runs through the woods. She nearly falls down, grabbing at her pregnant stomach and looking behind her. Something is coming. She reaches the edge of the woods and enters an open field. In the middle of it is a large house, which she scrambles to. She gets inside and calls out for someone she expects to be there, but gets no answer. That's when she feels her water break and panics, knowing the baby is about to arrive. The woman runs upstairs and barricades herself in a room, using a chair to block the door. Sitting in the corner, she begins to experience contractions, but suddenly someone pushes against the door. The woman pulls out a switchblade and prepares to defend herself. An infected bursts through and lunges at the woman. She pushes it away repeatedly, avoiding its bite, until she manages to stab it in the neck, and it falls over dead. The woman looks down and sees her baby on the floor, fully out of her womb. She looks at her own leg and sees a bite from the infected. Frantically, she cuts the umbilical cord and holds her baby, whom she names Ellie. That night, Marlene, the leader of the rebel Firefly group, enters the house with a few soldiers. They make their way upstairs and find the mother holding her baby in one arm, singing to the infant. The mother asks Marlene to take the child and get it to safety, then come back and kill her so she doesn't turn into an infected. The woman explains the umbilical cord was cut before she was bitten by the infected, but Marlene sees through her lies. The mother begs her to take the child, so Marlene finally does, not seeing another option. She gives the infant to a soldier, then shoots the mother. Years later, Ellie waits for Joel to finish scrounging for supplies. She's traumatized from her experience in Colorado. Joel comes back and offers her some food, trying to cheer her up. It doesn't work, so they instead just continue their trek into Salt Lake City, hoping to find the Fireflies. They make their way into the city, and Joel decides to go to the top of a skyscraper. When they find the passage up is blocked, Joel gives Ellie a boost to another level. As soon as she gets up, she sees something and runs off. Following after her as fast as he can, Joel manages to make his way up to her and follows her as she springs around the building, finally coming to an opening in the wall. The giraffe walks up to the building, and Joel encourages Ellie to feed it leaves. As she interacts with the animal, Ellie comes back to life and she's happy again, getting out of her slump. Later, Joel and Ellie make their way through more streets, heading towards the hospital they think the Fireflies are located in. They pass through an abandoned emergency medical camp. Joel explains to Ellie that the government implemented these at the start of the outbreak, but most shut down soon after. Curious, she asks about the stitches on his forehead. He tells her that after his daughter Sarah was killed on the first day of the outbreak, he lost his will to live. On day 2 of the outbreak, he almost gave up but flinched and the bullet grazed him. The emergency medical personnel were able to save his life, leaving him with only a small scar 20 years later. Joel and Ellie continue walking, listening to more of her puns, but behind them, soldiers approach. One tosses a smoke grenade that knocks them both to the ground, and a soldier butts Joel in the head with his gun, knocking him out. When he wakes up, Joel's on a hospital bed being watched over by 2 guards. Marlene enters and tells him that the soldiers did not mean to hurt him. They simply did not know who he was and took necessary precautions. He asks where Ellie is, and Marlene is reluctant to give information until finally, she tells him the girl's being safely prepared for surgery. Though weak, Joel begins to question why she's going into surgery. Marlene says that the Firefly doctors believe that because her mother was bitten by an infected while giving birth, Ellie has a small, harmless strand of cordyceps within her. When she got bit as a teenager, the harmless cordyceps convinced the regular cordyceps that she was already infected, so she never turned into a zombie. The doctor hopes to take these cordyceps from her body and use them to create a vaccine. Joel suddenly understands cordyceps is located within a human's brain. In order to create the vaccine, the doctor will have to remove parts of Ellie's brain. Before he can do anything, Marlene orders the soldiers to take him to the highway, give him Ellie's switchblade, and abandon them. The soldiers begin taking Joel out of the hospital. As they pass a floor sign, he takes note of what level the surgery bays are on. In the stairwell, he keeps pausing, agitating the soldier. Then, he turns around and tackles him. He uses the soldier's gun to shoot the other, then turns the gun on the soldier. He shoots him in the leg and asks where Ellie is being kept. When the soldier doesn't answer, Joel shoots him in the head. He makes his way out of the stairs and towards the surgery floor. He methodically walks through the hospital, killing Firefly soldiers without a second thought. He creeps towards the surgery room, switching out his rifle for the handgun of a dead soldier. He enters the surgery room just as the nurse tells the doctor that Ellie is ready. The girl lies unconscious on the operating table, and Joel tells them to stop, panicking the nurses. The doctor steps forward in protest, but Joel immediately shoots him in the head. The nurses scream as Joel tells them to unhook Ellie from the monitors. As soon as they do, he scoops her body into his arm and leaves the nurses with their lives. He takes Ellie to the parking garage, and there he finds a car getting its battery charged. As he steps towards it, Marlene steps out of the shadows with her gun drawn. She begs Joel to give Ellie back to the Fireflies. She's all of humanity's last hope to return to a cordyceps-free civilization. Joel questions where the humanity is for Ellie, and giving her no choice but to sacrifice her life. Marlene argues that it's too important to give Ellie a choice, but that if she had one, she would choose to help others. Joel shoots Marlene in the stomach, sending her crashing to the ground. He puts Ellie in the back of the car, then walks back over. Marlene asks to be spared, but Joel says he knows the only thing she'll do is come looking for them again, and he kills her. In the morning, Ellie stirs in the back seat. Joel calms her down and tells her that she's safe. When she asks what happened, Joel lies, saying that the Fireflies found they could not use her immunity to create a cure. They found many others immune like her, but no medical success in creating a vaccine. Then a raider group attacked the hospital, and Joel barely managed to get them both out alive. Ellie asks about Marlene. Joel avoids the question, and she gathers what his silence means. She turns over and goes back to sleep. Later, the car overheats and stops running. Joel and Ellie have made it to Wyoming, and he tells her that a few-hour hike will get them back to Tommy's commune in safety. Ellie gets dressed in newly scavenged clothes, and the two start walking. During the hike, Joel tells Ellie he thinks she would have gotten along with his daughter. They were both kind, funny souls. He tries his best to remind himself that Ellie is not his daughter, but cannot help but to think it. Towards dusk, they reach the final hill above the valley of the commune. Joel marches forward, but Ellie stops him. She explains that back in the mall with her friend Riley, after they each got bitten, she had to kill her best friend before discovering she was immune to the cordyceps. Then, every step of this journey has led to someone's death. She wonders, is it worth it for Joel to stay with her? He reassures her that in times like these, the best a person can hope to do is survive and find something new to fight for. He will do that for Ellie if she lets him. She asks him to swear that everything he has told her about the hospital, the fireflies, and the cure is true. He swears. Ellie looks up at him and agrees to go on.